Morning, everybody. So today we're going to talk about leveraging, and should you consider leveraging? There's a fine distinction, I think, between leveraging and going further in debt. Leveraging is what I would consider next level thinking in your development as an owner operator that you may not have considered before. That could take your business to the next level. So let's talk about what leveraging is and what it isn't. Let's say you have your investment portfolio of $100,000, which I recommend. Let's also say you're debt free, which I also recommend. You have no debt, credit score is over 800. You have your investment portfolio over $100,000. You're in good health. You're doing everything right. And you're thinking, how do I take my business to the next level? What's next? And we talked about, doing your maintenance at the dealership and buying your truck from the dealership and financing your truck somewhere other than through Crete. So you want to wean yourself off of your dependency on Crete. So you're not buying a truck from Crete. You're not financing a truck from Crete. You don't have the required maintenance account. You don't have a speed limiter. None of that stuff. That's all next level thinking and way to develop your business. But another part of this is leveraging. And leveraging is in financial terms. Let's say you have an asset. That $100,000 investment portfolio, that's an asset. If you wanted, for example, to put $20,000 down payment on another truck you're going to buy from a dealership, for example, are you going to sell $20,000 worth of stocks from your portfolio, which is your asset, to give to the dealership for down payment? Now let's think about that. Your investment portfolio, let's just say you have an S&P 500. Historical average is 10% per year on average. Some years it's 20% or higher. And that's a compound, has compound interest. So every year it accelerates and grows. It would be unfortunate if you had to sell some of your assets or stocks to make that $20,000 down payment, because you're taking away something that grows in value to convert it to cash to make that down payment. A better way to do that is get a loan. You consider, for example, a personal loan. Now, that's going in debt. However, you have assets to cover that debt. So, you could take out a $20,000 or $30,000 loan, personal loan, okay? You have the assets to cover that loan. So it's not like you are going underwater in any way. You could pay that loan off anytime you wanted to. That's leveraging. Now you take that $20,000 and use it to buy equipment for your business. So you're going to use that for your down payment on your truck. Now, you're thinking, okay, I understand. We don't want to touch the assets, but we want the liquidity that we get from leveraging. And then you start thinking about the interest rates. Okay, how much interest am I paying on the loan? How much interest am I getting from my assets? What's the interest on my truck payment? So on and so on. And you do the math, and like you can get, I'll give you an example of what I did on my last truck purchase. Credit score is over 800. I had over $100,000 in my investment portfolio. I didn't want to touch it. I had enough operating cash for the down payment, $20,000 down payment, but I wanted to maintain some operating cash for running the business. So what I really needed was some liquidity. So I got a $30,000 personal loan from Navy Federal Credit Union. It took me 10 minutes to apply, instant approval, and deposited in my checking account the very same day. Took $20,000 of that and applied it towards the down payment on the Peterbilt. And then I kept $10,000 for cash flow operating expenses on the business for truck repairs and things like that. So that's an example of using leverage. I didn't have to do that. I could have converted some of my assets, the stocks, into cash and gone that way. But that would have taken away from the compound interest that I would have gotten off my assets, off my stocks. So this gets a little tricky, right? Because now we're adding complexity to the business model. We're not simply saving money and paying for cash everywhere we go. You could go that way. And some financial advisors that you may see on the internet often say, debt is bad, you should be debt free, and so on and so on. That's generally true, but if you have assets, you are debt free. Because I'm not borrowing more than what my assets are worth. I'm just borrowing a fraction of what my assets are worth. And I could pay this loan off at any time. So it's not necessarily what you would consider bad debt. It's probably what I would characterize as good debt. It's good debt. If there is such a thing as saying good debt. Let's think about, strategies is that we know inflation goes up on average about 3% per year. So if the personal loan is, say, 10% and it covers 36 months, and I guess like $1,000 a month, 10%. Okay, so interest alone is 3%. So the value of the money goes down by like 3% a year. So you're borrowing at a very low cost of borrowing. That's kind of like cheap money. It's very cheap. It's very cheap to borrow this money. If you take part of that money that you borrowed, say you borrowed $30,000, but you kept $10,000 and you put it in a high yield savings account, that could earn you 4%. So now this money is getting very, very cheap to borrow. It's very, very cheap to borrow. And the other thing is, it is cheaper to borrow the money than it is to actually save the money. And you're like, what? How does this work? It's crazy, because let's say you want to save $30,000. It may take you a whole year to save $30,000 from your natural income. So out of your income, the government takes taxes, right? They tax your income. So you're paying federal income tax. You may be paying state income tax. You're paying FICA, which is Social Security and Medicare. So, your income is taxed. But if you borrow the money, it's not taxed. So these are different strategies to think about money. Now, the other thing is with your credit report, when you pay off all your debts, which I recommend first-time owner-operators do, they get out of debt, get your credit score up to 800. One thing that you can do to continue building your credit is use your credit cards regularly, but pay them off at the end of the month. That's perfectly fine. Don't carry a balance on your credit cards. And you're going to need an installment loan. If you want to continue to build credit, you're already over 800. You don't really need to continue, but if you wanted to, you could. And by getting a loan, you're creating an installment loan. Now you're making monthly payments, and you continue to build your credit. It's another strategy, to develop your business. You're going to have business credit. You're going to have personal credit. When you get that loan from the dealership, you're going to build business credit. They're going to report your truck payments through a service called PayNet. and it's going to show up on your business credit report. They're not going to, it's not going to be a personal finance option when you buy your truck. That's a business loan. So you have business credit and you have personal credit. You want them both to be really, really good. But you continue to build your personal credit and you continue to build your business credit, and you're never touching your assets. It's like if you're a homeowner, okay, and say you have a $200,000 house, and maybe it's paid off, okay, and you're not going to sell your house so you can go buy a truck. No, you're going to take out a home equity loan, how much money you need for that down payment on a truck, and then you're going to take that money and you're going to use it as a down payment on a truck. So you're leveraging your house to buy the truck. You have the hard asset, the house. You're going to use that as leverage to buy the truck. And then with the home equity loan, you probably talk to your accountant, but you could take the interest you pay on that and deduct it off your taxes. So you're going to win on that as well. So there's many creative strategies when people start thinking about financing things and how to use leveraging. This is kind of like high level stuff. I wouldn't recommend it for a first time truck buyer. Typically a first time owner operator comes into the business model with some consumer debt, a car loan, credit cards, maybe a personal loan or something. And the credit score may not be that great. It may be 700 or less. That's why I recommend, and I'll post a link in the video up here, my 5 keys to success is get out of debt, get your credit score over 800, build your investment portfolio to $100,000, make sure you have a primary care physician and annual physicals with blood work, and network with other owner operators. If you do those 5 things, those are 5 keys to success. But that's for beginning owner operators. For the senior owner operators who are more advanced, they want to take their business to the next level, you start thinking about leveraging. It's like, how can I leverage my assets so that I can grow my business? Let's say you have, $500,000 in your IRA. This is your retirement money. You don't want to take money out of your IRA to make a truck payment or truck down payment. No, you don't want to touch your retirement. What you do is you go get a loan, like a personal loan or home equity loan, and you leverage your hard assets to go, buy the truck. You don't take money out of your IRA. You don't take money from your retirement to pay for a truck. No, you take out a loan. A loan would be better. You don't sell your house so you can go buy a truck. No, you take out a home equity loan. Take some equity out of that home and go buy your truck. This is called leveraging. When you don't have any assets and you take out a loan, that's going to debt. It's a fine distinction because leveraging means you have assets. You can cover that loan at any given point. Going in debt means you don't have no assets. Your ability to repay that loan is strictly from your income. And that's tough. That's real tough because if you have anything that interrupts your income, you're not able to pay off that loan. So you're high risk. But if you have assets, you're not high risk. You're not gambling. You're not really going in debt. You're just getting liquidity. You could pay that loan off at any given point because you have the hard assets to back it up. That's leveraging. And that's something you should think about as a small business owner, is how do you use leveraging to take your business to the next level. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the internet.